Guess how many leaning towers are there? Coming up on Architecture Codex.
Architecture Codex. If you want to see more, like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe.
In my opinion, there are two kinds of people, doers and complainers. The doers design and build things, repair things. They are first responders, they join the military, they farm, etc. The complainers are the pundits, the politicians, the protesters, the lawyers, and the journalists. So, with the proliferation of skyscrapers being built around the world, and my understanding of how good the design and building industry is at doing it, I am hesitant to report on situations that went bad. You know I am not afraid of opining, but much of what I read about these situations is written with a certain "I told you so" attitude, written by people who could not contribute in any way to the design or construction of such buildings. When you are solving problems, you need to make decisions, and sometimes you don't have all the information you need to make the best decisions. This was summarized nicely by Donald Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, number 43, who said when you're making plans, there are the known knowns, the known unknowns, but there are also the unknown unknowns. The Millennium Tower in San Francisco is next door to the Salesforce Tower mentioned in Architecture Codex video number 72. This 645-foot tall building is Western United States' tallest reinforced concrete structure. As is usually done, the 58-story tower is missing the 13th floor for standard triskaidekaphobia, but is also missing the 44th floor, which some Asian cultures consider unlucky. This deference to superstition has not saved the building from some bad luck. Designed by Handel Architects with structural engineers DeSimone and partners, the building started construction in 2005 and portions were open for occupancy in 2009. But it was not until 2015 when developers notified authorities that the building was leaning. A public announcement followed in 2016, and the tilt has been recorded as much as 29 inches out of plumb. The tower was built in the reclaimed soils of San Francisco Bay on 80-foot deep piles. These piles do not reach the bedrock, but rely on the friction generated along their sides to support the load. All buildings settle a bit, their own weight compressing the soil below them, or in the case of friction piles, the piles slipping a bit while the friction takes hold, so to speak. Perhaps here the error was expecting the soils and the backfill to react uniformly enough, allowing the piles to sink uniformly enough so there would be no tilting. But when you rely on soils acting uniformly, you might be in for surprises. I know on my small projects, I prefer to either load a building completely on undisturbed soil or bedrock, but if you mix the two, you should expect some cracking. And with backfill soils, the substrate is never trustworthy. Some claim the concrete structure made for a heavier building than necessary, and they would argue that provoked the shifting. The designers of the Millennium Tower claim that excavation for the next door Trans-Bay Transit Center between their tower and Salesforce Tower was the cause of the problem, future construction being a very big unknown unknown. Construction on the Trans-Bay Center began in 2010, and 6 years later, the Millennium had their problems. The station opened in 2018, but closed shortly after for about a year, as it had its own structural issues. Could the installation of the foundations of the transit center undermine the foundations of the Millennium Tower? Very possibly. With less soil on that side of the building, those piles might have slipped just a little bit more, causing the building to tilt. And does the tilt represent a danger? Well, apparently not of the building toppling over, but it certainly will affect the performance of pipes, elevators, and glass on the facade, which would pop out and crash on the street below. A $100 million fix tried in 2020 added underpinning, another 52 piles down 250 feet to the bedrock on the north and west sides. As this solution expects it will take 10 years for the settling to even out, it is currently inconclusive as to whether or not this fix has worked. I suspect all this will be fought out in the courts. In any case, if anyone cares, architecturally the building is nothing exceptional, and if it were not for the structural problems, I might never have made a video about it. In Manhattan, 161 Maiden Lane, occasionally known with the vanity address 1 Seaport Residences, is also having problems. It is at least 5 years behind schedule and holding. The 58-story luxury tower stands incomplete on New York City's East River. The South Street Seaport was a shishi development where there was once a functioning fish market. I recall the strong aroma in the region when I was doing a lot of architecture work in that area of Manhattan decades ago. But the smell irritated the local finance people, and developers saw an opportunity to create a semi-historic tourist center, akin to Boston's Faneuil Hall and Quincy Marketplace. So the fish market was moved up to the Bronx because no one in Manhattan cares if the Bronx smells fishy. 161 Maiden Lane was meant to bring luxury housing near the successful South Street Seaport neighborhood and provide great views of the East River and Brooklyn's development. Plans for the tower were drawn up by architects Hill West Associates, who do much of the actual architectural design for many of New York City's fancy schmancy towers, which were officially designed by big-name famous architects. Hill West are very competent and very thorough, and the design of the proposed tower was very nice, showing they do not need famous architects to build well. The structural consultant, RA Engineering, recommended the usual pile driving method to reach the bedrock 150 feet below the 18th century landfilled surface. But when bids came back high, RA noted there was a new soil injecting technique which was technically feasible, even if it meant there might be an inch of settlement. This jet grout method would firm up the sandy soil at about 55 feet below the surface, and there a thick concrete mat foundation would be poured, and the building load would rest on that foundation. The developer, Fortis Building Group, went for that method, which went through normal design and review. They engaged Pizzarotti LLC as the construction manager. Work began in 2015, but by the summer of 2019, the developer publicly acknowledged the tilted settling. Even so, they topped out the building, and then an independent firm confirmed that the building was 4 inches out of plumb. While the soil injecting method worked, it worked unevenly. This might be the unknown unknown for this particular project. I interpreted that to mean the building was designed so stiff to resist the wind forces that once wind acted on it, it acted like a giant lever, transforming the forces to the base concrete mat foundation, and the substrate, being irregular, compressed on one side and shifted the building. Analysis determines that the building is structurally stable now, but there is a debate whether there would be increased leaning once fully loaded, and if that might aggravate failure of the building skin system. The developer is suing the construction manager and the architects. The architects are blaming the construction manager for their lack of supervision. The purchasers are suing the developer. And before all of this, there was a lawsuit because the nearby building known as 1 Seaport Plaza sued them for using the name 1 Seaport Residences. Apparently they can use the name for a few years, but then it will need to resort back to its address, 161 Maiden Lane. So while the building is a bonanza for the southern Manhattan legal profession, it remains unfinished and leaning. And in case anyone wonders, the building is very nice, but if it were not for the problems, I might not have done a video. This brings us to the most famous tilting tower in all of history. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is a leaning tower, as its name suggests. It is the bell tower, the campanile, for the cathedral complex of Pisa. In the Italian tradition, the church, the baptistry, and the bell tower are separate buildings. The white marble buildings are Romanesque in their use of round-top arches, although some flourishes on the baptistry have kind of a semi-Gothic feel. It is worth taking a moment to examine the buildings also on the site that are often overlooked. The basilica, started in 1063 by architect Buscetto and seamlessly expanded in the 12th century with a new facade by sculptors Guglielmo and Beduino, the style was influenced by many things, and the result is unique and beautiful. Built at the apex of the Tower of Pisa, a maritime rival of Venice, the design used fine colored and white marble, is richly detailed and wonderfully proportioned. Even if the tower was not leaning, it would still remain a worthy tourist destination. The tower was begun about 100 years after the basilica and took about 200 years to complete. Evidence points to the architect being named Diotti Salvi, who did the tower for San Nicola, also in Pisa. On August 9th of 1173, the foundation work began, but when the second floor was completed just 5 years later, the sinking was apparent. This appears to be a very local condition, as they did not experience anything like this with the foundation for the basilica or the baptistry. And again, very local, it's only one side of the tower foundation. This might be considered the unknown unknown. Everything stopped for about 100 years. They hoped that gave time for the foundation to settle. Imagine today's developers waiting 100 years before finishing a project. When it started up again, they built the next few floors on an angle, hoping the foundation would not further shift, but they could shift the center of gravity, allowing the tower to end up being straight. But the building continued to sink in the wrong direction. Because of this and the constant adjusting of the angle of each subsequent floor, the tower is actually curved like a banana and not straight. In 1964, the Italian government officially pursued ways that would keep the tower from falling down, but preserve the lean. The leaning is an important part of the identity of Pisa, so they don't want to make it completely straight. Recall in the movie Superman 3, evil Superman straightened out the tower. So that increases the challenge to preserve the tower and its tilted posture. When I visited the Leaning Tower as a student in 1979, nothing had yet been done, and we were allowed to walk up the tower, which had no safety railings of any kind on the lower floors. Things were much less formal back then, and it was presumed if you fell off, that was your problem. No one fell off in spite of the light rain and our youthful exuberance. And yes, these are my classmates mooning off the top of the Tower of Pisa. And there was an incident with a frisbee, which we won't discuss. But as I said, things were less formal back then. But by 1990, the tower, for safety reasons, was closed to the general public. In 1993, 870 tons of counterweights were added to center the gravity. The bells were removed, and a cable wrapped around the third floor was anchored to the ground to hold the tower still. Soil was removed from underneath the high end of the foundation, and the tower straightened slightly to its 1838 tilt. The tower was declared stable for at least 200 years, and it reopened to the general public in 2001. While it is likely that both the Millennium Tower and 161 Maiden Lane will survive, it is unlikely they will become international tourist attractions, except for some small group of people with kind of a macabre sense of curiosity. Work needs to be done, and analysis needs to continue. And you can argue that the architects and engineers should have known what was going to happen, But you can also argue they faced a certain amount of unknown unknowns. The building process always involves solving problems that pop up. They're just usually not this dramatic. And indeed, much of building technology has come through experience, through failure, ranging from cracks to collapses. And experience is the thing you get right after you needed it. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture CodeX.